I'm Martin Wilsey.
I'm Shay McGalley.
And I'm David Keener.
And this is the Hourlings podcast project. Welcome to another episode. Today it's going to be a little different, and Shay's going to be driving the bus. Shay, take her away.
Yeah, thanks, Marty. So today we have an exciting topic. We're going to be talking about our favorite quotes from authors that we love, quotes that either define what we think writing is all about, or what we think good writing is, or just make us all fired up to hit the keyboard. All three of us have come up with a variety of quotes from different authors, and we actually are going to start with a really, really important author, one of my favorites. Marty, you got a quote you're going to hit us with?
Let's see. Here we go. One day you'll wake up and there won't be any more time to do the things you always wanted to do.
Nice.
Do it now.
Tell us about that quote, Marty. Tell us the inspiration.
This is a quote from an email that I was telling somebody what actually was the driving force behind writing my first novel. And it was a long story, but he keeps quoting it back to me, and because he found it very memorable for him. So I have actually used that quote now on my blog, and I am glad to know that it's inspired other writers.
In fact, Marty, I'm sorry, go ahead, Dave.
And honestly, I find it kind of inspiring too, because while I didn't come up with a quote like this, I too reached a certain age, kind of one of those milestone ages, and said to myself, like, dude, you always wanted to be a writer. When the hell are you going to start? Right? And you have to think about stuff like that.
That's right.
Marty, this quote reminds me of the quote that I saw on your fireplace mantle. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do. I have a mantle clock that I had purchased and restored, and got it working, and it's a beautiful mantle clock. And I even had a little brass plaque engraved, and it has "Time is the fire in which we burn," which is a quote from a poem that I love, and is ultimately going to be the title of my memoir that I'm writing.
Nice.
So most people don't spot the plaque, much less read it. But Shane.
Yeah,
right.
Well, this is a classic Marty quote then, and I love that about you. So we're going to go now through a bunch of pictures with our quotes on it. And when one of us sees the quote that we picked out for this episode, we're going to read it out loud, and we're going to say why we chose it and why it was inspiring to us. So this should be fun. Let's get rolling.
Okay. I picked this one out. Greatness and madness are next door neighbors, and they borrow each other's sugar. And I like this quote. Joe Rogan, he's like this crazy dude, but he's incredibly creative and incredibly successful. And I actually agree with the sentiment of it. You got to be a little crazy to come up with stuff that is worth writing, and you got to be a little bit crazy to actually want to actually put up with everything that a writer has to put up with to get through.
Amen. Yeah, wasn't it Robin Williams who said that we're all born with a little spark of madness and we mustn't lose it?
Yes, that's another great quote, and it
yes.
was.
Yep, absolutely.
And
so
especially him.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I guess I stood corrected that we're not choosing just authors tonight, are we, as our quote speakers?
No, I think I picked quotes that inspired me as a writer, and multiple of them are not by writers about writing even.
That's cool, because it means it can apply to the craft and to lots of other parts of life.
Well, you can be creative in a lot of other ways than just being a writer. I just
Absolutely.
that's my chosen path, but it doesn't have to
Sure.
be everybody's.
That's
Sure.
right.
Sure. Cool. What's next?
Finish things. Neil
Okay.
Gaiman. Neil Gaiman said this before me, but I say this all the time. In
That's
fact,
right.
the folks in my writers group are, probably sick of me saying it because I say it so often.
He's infamous for it.
Yes, and there's people in the writers group who demand I say it, who expect me to say it when the
Yes.
conversation is going to a certain point. But the sentiment is true. The hardest part about being an author is finishing it,
Sure.
because there is another quote. I wish I could remember who said it. It said, "An author always thinks that his final draft is perfect until he reads it again."
Oh, man.
So finish things. You just got to decide. Sometime you got to spike that ball in the end zone and move on to the next project.
Well,
There's
there's also another common problem that writers have. I've seen people rewrite the first paragraph dozens of times. I've seen people just rewrite chapter 1 again and again and again, trying to get it perfect. And you just learn more from finishing something, even something small like a short story. Finish
Right.
something, you'll learn a lot more from it than you will continuing to rewrite chapter 1.
Yeah, perfection is the enemy of the good. And I have heard a term that goes perfection paralysis, because someone might be afraid that there is the slightest mistake and somebody might notice, and it is crippling to some writers.
Sure. All right. What's next?
That's mine. It's actually part of a longer quote than this from a preacher named Charles Spurgeon from the 1800s. But the first part of it's what people usually quote: "Begin as you mean to go on." And I find it to be very purposeful. If you're going to do something, don't do it half-assed and expect to fix it up later on. If you're going to do something good, then start making it good from the very beginning. Or if you're going to try to do an achievable goal, like getting a certain amount of word count per week or something, then start as you mean to go on. I find it very focusing. And you see it a lot of times in business seminars and such. So it's not so much about writing, but it's more about being purposeful about what you do and how you go about doing it.
Yeah, there's some writers, it's the opposite end of the spectrum from finished things. Some writers just can't face that first blank page, that first cursor at the top. They'll see it and they can't begin. And it's a problem for some people, but you can do it.
This reminds me a bit of what one of my history professors told us, the class, about writing an essay. And he said, be kind to your future self and don't imagine that this like unrealistic version of you is going to just do everything, some other time. You know it, you're not going to do it some other time. Now is the time to do it. So I mean, maybe that's not exactly the heart of this quote, but this is what that reminds me of too. Time management, just begin it strongly so that you're not putting it off or ending up being unkind to your future self. Good quote, Dave.
Oh, thank you.
Now, this is one of mine I added to this. I had seen this quote: "Don't live in a town where there are no doctors." It's a Jewish proverb. And the interesting thing was, this came up in the context of the importance of finding a writer's group. And I really took that to heart, and it inspired me in that way. And in fact, it has encouraged me to help other authors and give people legs up and, mentor in ways that I never was. So I really appreciated the sentiment of this quote.
Nice. Next up.
And again, not by a writer.
I know. Yeah.
Not
you're
even
3
about
for 3.
writing.
You're 3 for 3 so far. All right. So this is one of mine. And it says, Marty, can you read it? I have something blocking the
Yeah.
screen.
The thing that you are most afraid to write that.
Yes. So this is one that I believe in from experience. I have written many manuscripts, and I've peddled around manuscripts to publishers. I've always found that the ones that get the bites and the nibbles are the ones where I was like, oh, I'm not really sure I want that out there. Or, oh, I don't really know if this is like, I'm not comfortable with this just yet. But those are the ones that people want. And so I've lived by experience that this is true, that what you're afraid to write is what you need to write. And honestly, if you're not a little afraid of it, it might not be worth writing. I believe that. So this is my first one.
I see this also as a quote about stretching yourself a little bit.
Yeah.
Again, as a writer, I don't want to get stuck in a rut, and I don't want to always be writing the same type of story. So I'm gonna go for it. All of my stories, even if they're action stories, they're about something else.
Mhm.
Building a family, finding someone you can trust, whatever. They're about something else, and this dives right to the heart of that.
Yeah,
Definitely.
it really goes to, pushing the edge of the envelope of your comfort zone. And if you feel a little bit uncomfortable out there writing towards that edge, you're doing all right. I really like this quote. It's a great quote.
All right, next we got.
Yeah, this was me. There's no such thing as writer's block. That was invented by people in California who couldn't write. Terry Pratchett said that.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. People debate about writer's block all the time, and I never have it. If there is an opposite of writer's block, I have that, whatever that is. Writer's gush. I am sure I do not have enough years left in my life to type everything that I wish I could write. So I have huge thick notebooks of ideas that are awesome, and I'll probably never get to write all those books.
Gosh, I've got ideas and outlines. Like I've got entire stories that are outlined that I just haven't gotten to yet. So I'm like you. I don't really believe in writer's block, but part of that may also be, I've been a professional in the IT field for a long time, and I didn't. When my bosses said, write a document, it wasn't, oh, I'm not feeling the muse today. I had to write. So I'm just, you sit down, you write.
I mean, this is some serious shade to the California writers. I hope we don't have any viewers from California now at this point. It wasn't directed at you.
Terry Pratchett's very quotable. He's
Yeah, he is. I love that guy. Okay, this one was mine also. Sorry.
Man, Marty.
The worst enemy to creativity is self-doubt. And I find that to be absolutely true. And I'm a firm believer in being decisive and plowing ahead, even at the risk that sometimes you'll be wrong. So I am totally on board with this quote.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. I think one of the reasons I never started writing earlier in my life is exactly that.
Just
Yeah,
the
it's too
fear of
bad
failure.
too. It's, I don't know how people grow out of it. It's, the education system today, makes people fear of making mistakes. I mean, literally, the entire education system is like, do not make a mistake. It's the worst thing that could happen. No, it's not the worst thing that could happen.
Yeah, I mean, that's so true. Just the fear and the stigma of like permanent grade. You know, you can never go back and correct something that stays on your record forever, all that stuff. Yeah, that's really ingrained from a young age into many of us. And so may this podcast be a testament to break that cycle, and don't be afraid of a few mistakes and just get out there and create.
Break the cycle.
Yes.
Okay, Dave, was this you or me? This one.
Yeah, you guys had a lot of Stephen King. You can fight over it.
That was you. I have another Stephen King
Amateurs sit and wait for inspiration. The rest of us just get up and go to work. I have found this to be absolutely, really the best advice. If you were to sit and if I only sat and waited for the muse to write, I'd never get anything done. So I have found that you have to just get up, make coffee, and then sit down. So inspiration knows where to find you because your sleeves are usually rolled up and you're working already.
Yeah, once you start, tapping away, that's when things start to flow. And so it's very common that you'll come to a blank page and have no idea what you're going to do with it and just start typing a few sentences and then it starts coming to you. Every now and then, maybe I have to start over a couple times until I feel like I've got the right rhythm or the right mood or the right starting point. But that's really true. So don't wait for it. Just get up and start doing it, and it will come easier to you once you're in motion.
Yeah, no, everybody gets up and goes to work every day. It's
Right.
not optional.
This is what inspiration is for.
Yeah, people
Yeah.
put their seatbelts on every day. People brush their teeth without questioning it. You got to just sit down and do it.
This is what I use for inspiration. Wherever I am, I've got a notebook around and I write, I have that great idea, I write it down.
There you go.
I think Dave and I both had this one. Go ahead, Dave.
Actually, I had a different one, but.
Oh, okay. I'll do it.
You could also put all the good quotes.
Description begins in the writer's imagination, but should end in the reader's. Stephen King said that. And I find that to be absolutely true. And that's the great thing about writing. And when you can get that right and spark the movie in a reader's brain, it's awesome. I just love that, especially when it happens to my wife. And then I know that, I'm
Success. Success.
Well, for people who say there's no magic in the world, I think this is about as close as you come. An idea from my mind has moved to a sheet of paper and then has become, an image
in your
in
idea.
my mind. That's magic.
It is magic.
And one of those people, and that person that's reading it, and the writer might be dead. It's
exactly. It's like immortality, right?
Yeah. It's great.
Yeah, I think this also speaks to one of the key strategies of descriptive writing in general, like just the craft of it, which is to give the reader enough bold strokes that they can fill in the rest rather than overwhelming them with details, which will, it takes away some of that magic, Dave, that you're talking about, number one. And number two, it's just you're never going to end up with the clear picture that the reader has that makes it their own. So I think this is a great quote, not just in theory, but also for people who are practicing their descriptive skills. Agree?
Yep.
Nice. This is one that I stole from Marty's list, I guess. We both ended up with the same quote on our list, so it must be a good one, you guys. And this is, "Don't tell me the moon is shining. Show me the glint of light on broken glass." This is a classic example of the show don't tell motif that writers are very familiar with, but it does so in a very evocative way, where the quote itself is doing this, and so it's a very interesting duality here. It's telling us something, showing us some wisdom, but it's also performing the wisdom in the quote. So that's pretty awesome. But yeah, I'm definitely behind this quote, and the reason I chose it is because it embodies one of the things that I believe is good writing and that is one of the first things that writers need to learn to advance their skill. What do you guys think?
It's always been one of my favorite quotes, and I have used this quote to deliver an example of show don't tell,
Exactly.
and how it's effective. It's a very, very concise quote and tool for
Right.
learning that.
Chekhov is very quotable.
I also think it's a good example of, you can have a sentence tell you the information you need, or you can have a sentence that tells you everything that you need, plus also communicates a feeling, a sense of place, et cetera, et cetera. And to be able to combine those and do it with an economy of words, that's writing that can drive home really well into the reader's imagination.
Very
and
good
I
point.
find myself always, working hard to achieve that.
Love it.
Good quote.
All right, this is me again. If there's a book that you want to read, but it hasn't been written yet, then you must write it. I chose this quote because it embodied one of the reasons I began writing. I was a big reader. I loved fantasy and sci-fi, and as much as I had books that were my favorites and that were transformative as a young writer and reader, there was always that one idea that was never satisfied. I was like, oh, I wish I could read a book that was like this, or that had this in it, or was exactly speaking to me in this way. And so there was this hunger and this thirst in me, this quote perfectly exemplifies it. And that's why I wrote my first manuscript. I wrote exactly the book that I wanted to read, and the book that I hoped would have been out there that I could have found in the library. I didn't find it, so instead I wrote it. And I love that. I love that part of my journey as a writer.
Yeah, it's always been a really great lesson for me too. I always write the kind of books that I like to read personally.
And I would say the same thing. I think there's also a corollary to this one, where if you've picked up a book and you've gone, man, I could write better than that. Well, go for it.
Yeah, well, there you go. Yeah, there might be some negative bouncing forwards too.
Yeah, we won't write that review on Amazon.
Yeah. All right, this is me too. All right. So there is nothing to writing. All you do is sit down in a typewriter and bleed. Ernest Hemingway. In fact, this quote you can find on my website. And so I chose this quote because I really am a fan of Hemingway's writing. And also because it has an identity to it, which I really wanted to share. This is, for all of its maybe a little bit dramatic approach to the identity of a writer, this is how I wanted to be seen as, someone who doesn't just write, but just bleeds out, everything inside me onto the page. And of course, this is very Hemingway in style, to be this, masculine and visceral and all of this stuff thrown into a page, into a book, into a piece of prose. And so I just love this as an identifier for me and the writer that I want to be. I'm not sure if you guys share a fondness for this quote or this way of looking at it, this identity. What do you guys think?
Writing's too much fun for me to say that I match this quote. I'm more like Hemingway's other quote that I love: write drunk, edit sober.
Right.
I do like this. I do like this quote. I also like the fact that, like the other one we were discussing a few minutes ago, there's an economy of words to this that really gets to you. And if you think about this quote, the one word that really matters is bleed. If he'd said, just sit down at a typewriter and type, it wouldn't be that interesting a quote. But that one word, think about economy of words. That one word takes that quote and puts it up into the stratosphere.
Yeah.
So it's a piece of masterful writing as well as a good quote. And that's just kind of amazing.
Yeah, you know exactly what he meant by that one word, bleed. There's so much that could go into it. I could spend the whole podcast, talking about the cost of writing and how you have to dig and the pain of it and all that, but I don't need to because it's right there.
Well, that's the last one we got.
Hold on. I had a few, I think, that didn't make it in.
Oh,
Yeah, me too.
well, that was the only ones that I had in the folder.
Okay. So one of the ones I had is money flows toward the writer. I think that's an important one from a business aspect. Because a lot of writers, I'm going to be polite and say a lot of writers are not necessarily good at business. And can easily be taken advantage of by schemes that put money in other people's pockets. So as a general rule, money should flow toward the writer. That's from a sci-fi writer named James D. McDonald. And you'll see that quoted a lot in fanish circles as Yogg's law, for a reason that's too complicated to go into here.
Yeah, there's an entire industry out there for parting new authors from their money, which is unfortunate. A lot of hard lessons have been learned in that arena.
All right, another one of mine was a Stephen King quote that I thought we had in the list, but apparently not. If you don't have time to read, you don't have time or the tools to write. Simple as that. And I truly believe that. If I don't know how you write science fiction, for instance, if you don't read it. I don't know how you write mysteries if you don't read them. Yeah, I think it's important to become familiar with the tropes, the conversations that are out there already about various subjects, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
You guys.
I absolutely agree with that. I think it's a lot easier for you to write in a genre specifically if you read a lot of the stories that are in there. It stops you from telling the same exact story that has already been told, and it also allows you to spin, do mashups, to do creative variants on a theme. It's a good quote.
Yeah, I don't intake as much as these two do sci-fi and fantasy literature. Sometimes I get on my case about that, but I'll get right back on their case and say, I do intake other forms of media, art that reminds me of sci-fi and fantasy, that puts me in a mood, that helps me articulate what I want to say. Music, the same thing. And maybe when I'm not glued to academic writing and I'm all graduated and all that, I'll have more time to read sci-fi and fantasy. But I do agree in principle that you can't just have a barren wasteland of your contemporaries, of what is out there, and expect to be able to write and contribute meaningfully to that genre and that field. So yes, I do agree with that principle. Dave, you had one of my favorite quotes in your list, actually, from Mr. Douglas Adams. You want to move to that one next?
Sure. I love deadlines. I love the whooshing sound they make as they fly by. Douglas Adams commenting on deadlines, which he was notorious for missing. As am I, apparently. So I identify with him very strongly on that one.
We all know that sound. We all know it.
It's one of the weird things about being an indie author, that you're your own boss. So if you miss deadlines, you're only going to beat yourself up. Or not.
That's funny.
Sometimes you just hear the whooshing sound and laugh like a pirate.
And,
I love it.
My last one was being a writer is like having homework for the rest of your life. It's actually a quote from Lawrence Kasdan, who you might recall was the writer of Raiders of the Lost Ark and a few other famous movies.
Yeah,
it's from Raiders of the Lost Ark, you said?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah,
it is but the only thing is, Dave, I never did this much writing for homework.
But I'm
Seriously.
referring also to the research aspects of being a writer, which, you have to be careful not to go down the rabbit hole, but I really enjoy the research aspects of researching for world building. I've researched things like different types of ships, how to survive in the jungle, all kinds of stuff. And it's kind of like being a polymath sometimes. What am I researching this week? It's fun.
Yeah.
Cool.
We started out with a quote from Marty himself. So I'd say that we end with a quote from ourselves. What do you think, Dave?
Sure.
Yeah, you want me to start? You can.
You can start. I'm not sure I have a quote, but okay.
Oh, you're so full of wisdom. It just drips off of you. I'm sure you have one. I have a few quotes that I have said and I've written down and that I use in workshops. But the one I'll say tonight is, I write to live 1,000 lives. And I think that that is something that many writers can relate to. We write to experience humanity and to experience the world in many different ways. And in doing so, we become more empathetic, but we also get the thrill of living so many different lives as a writer. And so that truly is one of the reasons why I am so in love with the craft. I write to live 1,000 lives. Dave?
Oh gosh, I'm not sure if I can make this into a really good quote, but one of the things I really like about science fiction is that in a way it's kind of a very elaborate game. I tell you a story, I tell you what the prerequisites for my story are, and everything else that I write in my SF story has to be consistent with my prerequisites. So for instance, if I say that you can invent, that you can, like Michael Crichton did, that you can recreate dinosaurs from DNA caught in amber, even if that proves to be scientifically impossible, still everything else in the story had to flow from that. And that's how you get dinosaurs eating people. So again, I look at science fiction as this kind of elaborate game where I'm trying to make I'm trying to make a world that's plausible and consistent and that you can feel like you could have adventures there.
I can boil that down. Science fiction is an elaborate game. That's it. Yep. You can take that and run with it.
Okay.
Yes. These are all. I'm sorry, Marty. You wanted to say something?
No, I was just going to say, great show, guys. I enjoyed this.
These are all great quotes, and some of them were new to me, and other ones I'd seen before, and I've loved them. To our viewers, these are all classic quotes that are not hidden away in a book. You can Google them and find a million more out there to inspire you. And I hope that they did. And I certainly feel inspired myself. So I want to thank Marty and Dave for participating and coming up with great material.
Cool. Excellent show. And we will see everybody next week. Ciao.
Take care.